Yes, welcome to my presentation, Demystifying Commonly Used MS Graph API Attacks, Echoes of Intrusion. Who of you worked with MS Graph API in the past? Wow, all experts here. Now I'm intimidated. You are all doing great. So before we start the presentation, I want to thank our awesome sponsors. Without them, PowerShell conference EU would not be possible. Thank you so much. So to me, just until last month, I was working as a security researcher at Microsoft. Now I'm still in the same field. I'm now working as a security research PM at Microsoft. So scopes just changed a little bit. I'm now working more strategically, still doing research. I also wrote the book that they were so nice to mention in the welcoming session today, PowerShell Automation and Scripting for Cybersecurity, Hacking and Defense for Red and Blue Teamers. And last but not least, you all are experts with MS Graph. I'm just a noob. I was only working with MS Graph to support my research. And that means I was just looking at the telemetry and trying to rebuild what I saw there. So I was reverse engineering the results. There are also other great sessions that I would like to raise your attention to that are also MS Graph related or authentication related. So if you haven't gotten them yet on your agenda, please add them. I don't know. I don't think I need to explain this to you. We have so many graph experts in the session. But what is Microsoft Graph? It's basically the interface to query everything in Azure. So you can interact with all things that you got there. And if you are not under those amazing experts in this room, I found the Graph Explorer very helpful. It's a website where you can just generate basic graph queries to understand MS Graph in a better way. Let's start with the basics. To perform queries via MS Graph, you need several things. First of all, you need to authenticate. To do so, you will need the access token. We're not deep diving into this part today. For my demo, I will be using Cloud Katana, written by amazing Roberto Rodriguez, and I'm relying on getCK device code and getCK access token to simplify my demo. As a next step, somehow you want to access the resources. So what do you need? You need the permissions to do so, which is, for example, if you want to read emails, you need mail read. If you want to see what users are there, you need users read, and there are many more permissions that you need to configure for the API. And you need the API endpoint. In this case, if you want to read users' attributes, it would be the URL that you see here on the screen. And last but not least, you need a method to access MS Graph. There are various modules that you can use that are already pre-built. You could also use invoke a web request, but in this demo, I'm going to use invoke REST method. So you see here, you have the URI again. That is the URI of the endpoint that you want to query. We have the method. That is the HTTP method. So you can get to request something back from the API. You can post to make changes, or there are also other HTTP methods, but we specifically will look into post and get in this session. In the header, you pass the authentication token, the access token, and also that it's JSON mainly. And in the body, which is optional, you can pass body parameters if the endpoint requires it. So as an example, if we want to change our own password, we have the change password URI, we have the method post, the HTTP method. In the header, we specify the access token and we say it's JSON. In the body, because this endpoint requires additional parameters. This is why we pass the parameters in the body. We say the current password is the one shown, and we want to convert it to a new password and convert it to JSON to be a JSON object. And once we have that, we pass all the parameters to the invoke REST method, and like that, we can easily change our own password. So this is just an example how Graph works and how you can query it and what I use as a base in my demo. As I said, everything that you see here is reverse engineered from the telemetry that I saw in the back end, and I tried to recreate the attack path. It's not tied to a specific actor. It's not part of my entire research. And as a first step, we have the initial access phase. Somehow the attacker needs to get access. And in our example, we are doing this via password spraying. Next step, if you are in the organization, what do you do next? Well, I want to find out more about the environment. I want to see what users are there. What applications are there? What can I do to abuse the actual environment to support my goals as an attacker? Once I have that knowledge, I prepare privilege escalation to extend my privileges to get more rights, establish persistence, and last but not least, I fulfill my goal, which is in this case, extracting information like emails. So as a first step, the attacker performs a password spraying, and we find out that there is an account, which is Miriam victim, which we then use for the discovery. In the discovery, we also find out, luckily, that the same account that we already compromised here is the owner of an application. And the best thing for that, in this case, for the attacker, is that the application has application read, write, all permissions, which allows the attacker to use this application to add credentials to any other application. So the attacker adds credentials to the application they own and use the new application to add, again, credentials to an application that has mail read permissions, because that supports the final goal to extract and download emails in the organization. So, no, I'm not running this demo from my organization giant device. In this demo, I have some global functions. So I have even further. Oh, okay. The Zoom reset. Oh no. Thank you so much for the hint. I was trying it out earlier, and I already zoomed in, but it reset. Zoom in. Yeah, I tried it earlier, but it's plus. Okay, only the one plus did not work earlier. Is it better now? Should I zoom in once more?
It's great for me.
It's great? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I have some initial functions, some global functions. So I have the get device authentication. It uses Cloud Katana to authenticate. So I get the device code, which I can use then to authenticate my user. Those are helper functions. We will not talk too long about them. I then have the get user access token. This is the other function I'm relying on Cloud Katana to get my access token. And then we have the invoke graph request function. This is basically the functionality behind what I just explained in the beginning. So you have the header, you have the parameters, you have the body if needed, and then it just executes the invoke REST method, cmd-let, and something. It's not easy with this zoom. I scroll too quick. So I'm just also executing this function to ensure everything will work. And last but not least, we have a function that we will use later. So we are not looking into it yet, but I'm already executing it. So first step in the attack chain was the password spraying. I created a script, invoke password spraying for it, and you can provide a password list and a user list. You can also configure a timeout in seconds, because if you spray passwords, at some points the account will experience a logout. So if you spray too many passwords in a very short time, then you just get locked out and the entire exercise is for nothing. What we have, when we spray passwords, we have certain return codes that we get back. And if there was an error thrown. We have, for example, one reason is an invalid password. Other reason is username does not exist, and this API is very chatty, which is great for an attacker. We have account is disabled or is locked, and yes, I saw that a lot when I was developing the script. We have tenant does not exist. MFA is in use, which means, hey, the account and the password, they do work. We have conditional access as in use. That means the same. The account and the password are valid. We also have password is expired and also unknown error, or in the best case, success. We don't have any MFA in place and the password would just work like that. And what I'm doing in the script is I'm adding all the information I'm getting back to a custom object. And you see here, web request is valid, web request error, and everything that we query here, also error description. You can access the information later when we get back the object. And here, in this case, I have a user list with a moderate set of users. I have a password set with a moderate set of passwords. We say we wait 30 seconds, and I have enabled the option verbose to also see the output. Without this option, it would just run through and you will not see anything. And I just started the invoke password spraying because we are iterating through some accounts and it's sleeping for 30 seconds every time. So we now need to wait a little bit until all the passwords are tested. And I think there will be one more iteration. So we just need to wait 30 more seconds and then it should be done. Yes, and in the case that there are multiple accounts that are locked out, if we have at least 10 accounts that are locked out, you will be prompted and say, okay, do you want to continue the password spraying? Because it seems that there are already a lot of accounts locked out. And you can decide to continue or to cancel the password spray. And like that, you have the control even if there are many locked out accounts. Oh, okay. No, one more iteration. And here we go. So we have here the possible passwords. And you see, this is the PS custom object. You see which username was tried. You see which password was tried. You see if it was valid or if the user or what the error was. And now if we want to look for all valid accounts, we can say where object is true. And wow, we do have actually an account where we found a valid password. By the way, I will change this password after the demo. In this case, we have multi-factor authentication in use. I was not allowed to remove that for the demo. But this is cool because we now know we have an account where the credentials work. And there are maybe also other options for the attacker to circumvent MFA. And in general, you can also see there are other errors. So username does not exist, invalid password, or in this case, MFA is in use. Now we do have our account and we want to authenticate as this user, as the Miriam victim user. So we are now authenticating with the code. Good thing that we just found the password. And in this case, just need to authenticate. And we say, yes, of course, we want to sign in there. And let's get the access token. And now we are set to get started. As a next step, we want to see what application permissions are there in the environment. So I wrote a little script to get the application permissions. This is now performed way quicker than the password spraying. We have, again, the web request. We have a helper function to add to a custom function. And here we have the API endpoint to get all graph permissions, so all service principals. When we are talking about service principal, a service principal is like a service account for an application. That is when we are talking about service principals. And we get get all graph permissions, which we then unpack in our next function. And we are looking for the resource access and adding all the permissions to our custom object. We have, in this case, we have application permissions where the application directly is permitted to perform actions. We have delegated permissions where you delegate the application, and we have resource-specific permissions that we all want to enumerate. And once we have that, we can now look into the result and see what permissions are there in our environment for all the applications. And if we want, for example, we want to see, okay, which applications do have mail read? So which are worthwhile to compromise if I want to read all emails of all users? And we find out that we have, for example, an MW mail read app, which would be a valuable target. And if we want to see what applications do have application read write access rights, we see that the MW victim SP does have these permissions. We can also export the result and just create a power pivot to I have a demo prepared. So you get the application permissions as a CSV. I have a little example here prepared, and you can use Power Pivot in Excel just to structure it and to see what applications have which access rights, just to enumerate the applications in your environment before an attacker does that, so that you are ahead and can act. As a next step, we also want to find out all the peanut record users. So we are looking at the users and invoking our web request. And in this example, we look for users that have an email address configured and want to have only the peanutrecord.com domain included. And we see here we have nice Clementine Brown as a user. We save this response, we save the UPN in the all UPN variable for later use. Now, as a next step, so we are the the Miriam victim user, which is the owner of the MW victim SP. So let's use this application for our later exploration. So what we are doing here, we are adding a credential to an application, to the MW victim application, which allows us to retrieve the access token to log in. So first, we also get the app ID of this application using the access token of the Miriam victim user. And now that we have the app ID and that we have added the credential to the application, we can also get the access token. Let's go quickly to the add credential to app. In this case, we have a body for the web request. Basically, we are just adding a display name, which is saying, hey, this is an important password. Please do not delete it, so that the attacker still has access to it. And the URI is the add password to the app object ID. And you get a generator, the secret back. And we convert it to a secure string because like that we can reuse it later. And that is the entire step of adding the password. And now that we have the credentials added, we can retrieve the password and get an access token for this app. We store the access token in the app access token MW victim SP variable. So we already have escalated our privileges now we are an app that can add credentials to other apps. This was not possible for the user because the user was only the owner for the last app. So let's use this privilege to establish persistence to another app and to again add a credential to the app. We now also get the app ID for the MW mail read app. This is the app that has mail read privileges that we are now going to exploit and use to get all the emails, to download all the emails. And it worked. And we got our access token back for the mail read app. And now, if you remember, we have here the all UPN variable that we discovered in the discovery step, all the user principal names. And we're using this to get all emails from all users in this organization. And you can see Clementine Brown's emails are being downloaded successfully. So what can you do to protect yourself against attacks like that? There are some things that I always preach since 7 years or more. And basically, educate your users. Have your users set up good passwords. Monitor if you want to see password spraying attempts. Monitor and investigate unusual attempts. Are there multiple login attempts from the same IP address, for example? Or are there many accounts at the same time? Enable MFA, conditional access. Logout policies. And logout policies are a mighty instrument. If you remember my attempts for the password spraying script and identity protection policies. Also block legacy authentication, also in Azure. And Secure Score is a great tool that you can use to secure your environment even better. Follow recommendations. We are doing this work for a purpose, to secure your environment. Something that is also an evergreen is to protect your high-value devices. Now that we are talking Azure, this does not mean that you don't have those tier 0 devices any longer. That also does mean that you need to protect your Azure devices and also your high-value devices on your legacy in your on-prem environment. High credential standard, really important to separate administered passwords from regular user passwords. Audit your configuration. One of the most reasons why attackers can do privilege escalation is because of the configuration, that they have flaws, that they, for example, some users have access to some key vaults that they maybe should not have access, or that passwords are found in configuration files, code files. As I said, also key vaults. Review who has access. Restrict your access to a minimum. Add processes and tools to also check your code, check your configuration, and review dangerous rules and permissions. So I know we are already 1 minute over it, but let's shortly look into the dangerous permissions. And I just listed some of them that I found during my research being very dangerous. So in general, you have those evergreens, you have read, write, full control, write, and manage. But you have also other permissions that could cause really great harm in your organization if the wrong user has them or application has them configured. In this example that we were looking at today, we had the application read write all and the mail read permissions configured, which allowed the attacker to elevate privileges and to finally extract all emails. This is just a reference. Don't read it all. But for example, application administrator can be also very harmful if you have the wrong people assigned to it. Especially applications are very likely used because it's sneaky. You're less likely to detect if a service principal is performing something. And to audit your service principals regularly, I created the script get msgraph application permissions that we found earlier, that we saw earlier here. Use that script to regularly audit your service principals. I will upload it on GitHub later. Use that. It's for your benefit. Also, watch if credentials were added, especially if you did not approve that or if you are not aware of those credentials. Encrypt your data and your emails. There are great right management solutions there. And if those emails were encrypted, we could not have easily read them. So do yourself a favor and work on that in your organization. Also, look out for alerts in your XDR. They are getting better and better, and they are detecting more and more. And also rely on the new msgraph as activity logs table that was just released this year that you can use to look for graph-related activities in your environment. And with that, I just also created a list of helpful resources. So later you can also go in there, look a bit what is helpful to you, and maybe you find some of the links also very useful. And with that, I hope I inspired you a little bit to see what's possible and to see what attackers are doing out there and how you can secure your environment in a better way. And I'm here for the questions. Thank you very much. Yes.
When working with applications and service principals and other workload identities that have credentials that can be added to them, how do you, what are your recommendations to try to reduce the false positives when trying to monitor credentials being added? Because usually a credential being added in a log is fine, but sometimes it's not, and that's when you want to affect it.
Yes, that's a hard question.
Repeat the question also for the video.
The question was, when working with service principals and adding credentials, what can you do to reduce false positives? So basically, you want to know how can you spot the malicious ones, right? And that is also a hard question that I try to also address in my research. Basically, to automate it, it's harder. In a well-managed environment, you have certain people that are doing those operations. So that is some way that you know if certain accounts are doing this. You can already say, okay, that's mostly fine. Then, if there are accounts that shouldn't do it, that is something where you need to look closer. And in some cases, maybe it's a legit operation. And if it's really unclear, the best way is to talk with people. Did you add that? But what I also found useful is to look into other resources like risky sign-ins. So if the account did sign in from an unusual location, for example, that might be a strong indicator that that was not a legit operation, or if there was an impossible travel also related to that account. And you can look where the account usually signs in, and if there is some difference from that behavior, maybe you want to investigate further. That's how I would tackle it.
Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions? Or any thoughts how you will apply that knowledge that you learned today in your daily work, in your organization? Okay, you need to say, yes, please.
Just wanted to add, so what we currently do is that we identify applications that have like high privileges.
Yes.
And store them in Sentinel and an additional watch list. And those we monitor closely if something changes there because of potential powers. So just how we use you.
Yeah. I think this hand was first, or this one, and
what we do in our company is to have a two-party model. So one party can request permissions, for example F, but then you need one global administrator to grant you the admin consent. And that I can recommend to everybody because you completely mitigate this attack path. And the second part is when you're reading emails from Exchange or doing something else in Exchange, you should always make sure that this app registration is configured in Exchange to only access with the access rule the parts that it actually needs. Then you also don't need to encrypt all emails.
Yeah. Well, it's an additional barrier to also encrypt emails. So I would not recommend to leave it out, but the more you do, the secure your organization will become. Then
reduce the number of full administrative rights. So
yes.
Have a defined granular list of rights which are definitely necessary. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's worth it to have the grant the full permissions for one application or the other.
Yeah.
Seems obvious, but
yes, that really seems obvious, especially after I preached it for so many years. So for the video recording, one approach, I see your hand, I remember. One approach was also to administrator approval for all the permissions added, which is also very good behavior. Another approach was to reduce the administrators, which should be done in every organization, to be honest. Are you also mapping API permission to administrator level rights? Because I would also recommend doing that, because in some cases you just have global administrator rights if you have a certain permission. So you can later, I just leave the Q&A, but you can later look into the slides and evaluate those permissions again. And Christian, you also...
One thing was also about the EWS permissions for an registration.
Yeah.
To then make sure you have in place some kind of ABAC for application or you can fix the policies, which you should switch to ABAC, but
yeah.
For one, because you probably don't want to have any mailbox in access while having any kind of administration.
Yeah. So can you just summarize it into one sentence that I can just repeat it for the video?
Yeah, sure. The thing is, when you have some kind of app registrations and you do something in the EWS context, just make sure you only target the mailbox that are really necessary for the browser job, automation, whatever. And just make sure you take, for example, AirBag for application on Azure application policies in place.
Yeah, okay. I can't repeat it. Sorry, that was too long. No worries. But it was good advice. Yeah. So all really great practices here. And if there are any more questions, let me know. I'm here. I'm around. And with that, thank you for your time.